What's up YouTube? KS Gun Guy here. Thanks for joining me today. If you like what you see here, do be sure to like, subscribe, and share, and there's plenty more content on the way. Before we begin, don't forget Wednesday nights around 7 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Eastern, I get together with my buddies 1776 or Bust and Big Johnson Guns and Gear, and we talk about firearms that we're into and reviewing at the time, and ones that are on the wish list, of course, and other gun-related topics. So we have a lot of fun with the people that join us there. I'd love to see you there as well. So what you have in front of you are two fantastic firearms here. We've got the Sig Sauer P320 Compact and the CZ P-10C. Now I've started to do a series of if I could only have one, and basically I'm bringing in guns of various types, and they don't have to be exactly alike. They don't have to be glaringly different either, just two different guns, and comparing and contrasting these guns and taking a look at things like the overall stats, the features, the grip, feel, fit and finish, shooting characteristics, and even the trigger. And by the end of it, there will be a winner. Now, keep in mind, that doesn't mean that one is necessarily better than the other, and this is pretty much opinion, but it's a lot of fun to kind of take stock in what you have and say, man, which one do I really like better if I could only have one? So that's what we're doing here. So before we begin, of course, these are unloaded, and I do have unloaded magazines in them just for the sake of the comparison here. But as we start, we'll take a look at a couple of statistics. Now, these are not going to be deep dives into either one of these guns. I do have full-blown reviews on both of them. Be sure to check those out when you can. But in terms of the overall length, the P-10C does have it just by 1/10 of an inch at 7.3 inches. Versus the height on the P320 without the Romeo red dot, and I'm not going to include the Romeo throughout the video. We'll pretend like it's not even there. The height is 5.3 inches, so this beats the P10C by 1/10 of an inch. Now, in terms of the barrel length, the P10C walks away with 4.02 inches, so about, once again, a 1/10 of an inch difference between the two. From a weight standpoint, they're almost the same. The P10C takes it just by a little bit at 26 ounces versus the 25.8 ounces on the P320. Now, from a width standpoint, I'll try and set these guys up so you can see them pretty well. The width on the P320 is 1.4 inches, and the width on the P10C is 1.26 inches. So the P10C is just a little bit more narrow. Now, from a sight standpoint, both of these guns do come stock with steel sights. Now, the P320 has a couple of different options. You do have standard steel sights, and then there are also the Siglite night sights that you can get with them as well. Now, of course, the RX does have the suppressor height sights, but the normal P320 would have the shorter sights on it. But you do have a couple of options there. Right now on the P10C, you do have steel sights, and they're kind of a Novak style sight with just a little bit of a ledge for one-handed manipulations. Right now, these sights are just the phosphorescent sights, or I like to call them the glowy sights there. They do absorb a little bit of light in the room or outside, whatever the case may be, and they glow for a short period of time, but they do have to be charged. Either way, both of them do come with good steel sights right out of the box. Night sight options on the P320, hopefully forthcoming on the P10C, or perhaps they're out now and I just haven't seen them quite yet. Now, from an overall feature standpoint on the guns, both of them are ambidextrous, and what I mean by that is the slide stop or slide release on the P320 is ambidextrous, and then the magazine release is also ambidextrous. However, you do have to change that out. You have to swap it around. Versus the P10C, also having the ambidextrous slide release, lock rather, but the magazine release is actually ambidextrous out of the box. So maybe a little bit of a leg up there, especially for you left-handed shooters out there, which is kind of nice. And then we've got our accessory rail for lights, lasers, grenade launchers, that sort of thing on both. Both of them also do have good slide serrations on the front and the back. Makes for any press checking or slide manipulations very handy. Now I have to give just a tiny bit of a leg up on the P-10C, and the only reason I do, the slide serrations on the P-10C are pretty fantastic. They really have quite a bit of a bite to them. Not so much that they're going to hurt you by any stretch, and if you're concealed carrying, I don't think it's going to irritate your skin very much, but there is definitely plenty to grab onto there, and I like that quite a bit. Both of them do have nice finishes on them, seemingly both pretty robust and rugged so far. Time will tell on that, but at least right now they both look pretty good. Now here's where we start to get a little bit different. From a grip standpoint, and a lot of you I know are familiar with the P320, the P320 has kind of almost like a very subtle stippling that goes all the way around front, back, and the sides. And some people say that it's a little bit too slick, there's not enough texture there. I disagree. I actually think there is just enough to really keep it in your hand and solid. Now, if it was a little bit more subdued than this, I'd say, yeah, they could probably use a little bit more. But I think they were smart to go with this because it's nice and subtle, but there is just enough grip there. And then there's a little bit of contour on the frames for you as well. Now, the one thing about these grip frames are you can swap them out, which is nice. So this is a medium that actually comes with the compact. You can go with the small or a large. However, you do have to purchase them. And if you've been looking around for especially FDE or flat dark earth grip modules, or even to a degree the OD green grip modules, they're pretty hard to find, and when you find them, sometimes they're pretty expensive. They typically sell for $45 or $50. I've seen them for $60, $70, even $100, and I think they've actually taken them off of eBay because apparently they violate some sort of eBay policy, which is too bad. But again, you do, to change or customize the grip, you do have to spend a little bit more money. Now on the P-10C, it's a one-size-fits-all. In other words, you can't buy different frames. However, they do have 3 different back straps, a small, medium, and a large. I've got the medium on this right now, and it seems to fit pretty well for me. So both of them do have a little bit of modularity when it comes to the grips. They just do it a little bit differently. Now, another thing about the modularity, and one thing that the P320 has that a lot of other guns don't have, the entire trigger system in this gun actually can come out. Tim, and I'm sure a lot of you know that, and a lot of you probably have this, but what that means is not only can you drop the entire trigger assembly into another frame, like I spoke of a moment ago, but you can actually switch it to different calibers and different size guns. You can actually take that trigger system and drop it into a subcompact or a full size, or even the carry model, which has the slightly larger grip frame on it. So that modularity gives you a little bit more flexibility in terms of firearms, especially if you're in a state that maybe doesn't allow for owning a lot of firearms. You can have the one trigger system, which is the registered system, and get different grips and packages, that sort of thing. The CZ is just kind of a one-stop shop. The firing mechanism is what it is. It's not the registered firearm itself. So that's it in terms of the stats and the grips and features, that sort of thing. Is there a winner yet? Well, not really. They both have their features, their pluses and minuses. That wraps up the features of both of these firearms. Now let's go ahead and take a look at a little bit of shooting and see how they do at the range. All right, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that footage at the range. So from a shooting perspective, both of them are fantastic shooters. I've spent a fair amount of time with P320s. I've got quite a few reviews out there on the various types of P320s. But the P-10C I'm still getting used to, but it's growing on me, and it's growing on me a little bit quicker than I actually thought it would based on my original review of it. I maintain that it's not revolutionary, it's not the greatest thing in the world, like some people perhaps were suggesting. Not pointing any fingers at all, but it's a good gun, and it's growing on me. So let's go ahead and take a look at the triggers of these two guns and see how they stack up. So we've got our P320 here, and we'll reset our gauge. These are always a little bit tricky on camera, but we'll see how we can do here. All right, 7 pounds, 6.4 ounces. A little bit heavier trigger. Now this is the stock trigger. It's not the Apex trigger or anything like that. 6 pounds, 9.8 ounces. That's a little bit better. Let's see how our third does. I won't do any more than 3 with each. Okay, 7 pounds, 1.2 ounces. So if we average that out, it's going to be around 7 pounds. So that's a pretty stout trigger. However, as we continue to explore the triggers and kind of test them here for the next couple of minutes, we'll find that the P320 really does have a very good trigger. Now, the P-10C is a little bit more tricky to gauge here because of the geometry of the trigger, but we'll give it a try and see how it does. 5 pounds, 3.1 ounces. Now, unfortunately, it always pulls down a little bit no matter what I do with this, so that kind of gives the P-10 a little bit of, I guess, an advantage. 5 pounds, 15.7 ounces. We will do that one more time. I'll see if I can keep it a little bit more still here. Still coming in under 6 pounds, which is pretty good. That's a good pull. 5 pounds, 3.1 ounces. So we've got about 7 pounds on the P320 and maybe 5.5, 5.75 pounds on the P-10C. So from a weight standpoint anyways, the P-10C has it a little bit, but how is the feel of these two triggers? So the P320 from a trigger standpoint, now again, this is the stock trigger, but I like the stock trigger on this. I think it feels pretty good. So there is just a little bit of an uptake, about 2 millimeters here, and it's reasonably smooth. It's not the smoothest trigger I've ever pulled, but it's reasonable for sure. And then we get to our wall. And there's our break, and it's a very subtle, soft break. It's tactile and it's audible, but it doesn't wow you by any stretch. And then we've got our reset, and once again, very subtle. However, it is certainly tactile and it is audible. So we'll do this again. Got our uptake, our wall. There's the break. And there's the reset. So the trigger on the P320, while not the best, not outstanding, it's good. And although it's heavy, it's smooth, and it's good enough. It is certainly good enough. So for the P-10C here, we've got a little bit more of a flat trigger. Now it does have the safety dingus or safety lever on it. So we have quite a bit more uptake than we do with the P320. So there's a fair amount of distance there. I'd say between 4 and 5 millimeters. Although it's smooth, there's some resistance for sure, but it's smooth. But once we get to that wall, there's a break, and I got to tell you, it is very audible. It's very crisp. It is quite a snap, noticeably different. And then we've got the reset. Now I have to say, the reset is fantastic on this firearm. It's about 1 to 2 millimeters out from the break. So I'll go ahead and do this again. We've got our uptake, smooth, but some resistance. Then we've got our break. And then we've got our reset. and then when you let it go, just to give you a reference, all the way back. So the P-10C does have a fantastic trigger. Now, if you saw my original review, I actually had the black version of the P-10C. That was a test and evaluation gun. It's mine, but that will probably be a carry gun more than just a kind of an enjoying collection gun like this, the FDE. But the black one had a slightly different trigger, and I'm not quite sure why. It could be that they're still working out some kinks as they're manufacturing them. Both have good triggers, but I feel like the FDE might be just a little bit lighter. Now, it also could just be me. It could be a mental thing. Who knows? But again, both of these firearms in front of you have very good triggers, just a little different. This has a heavier trigger, but it's soft, and this one's got a lighter trigger, and it's a little bit more snappy. Now, the one last thing, or actually a couple of last things to talk about before we wrap this up, you will notice, and some people make a little bit more of a fuss about this than others, but you'll notice that the Sig Sauer does stand a fair amount taller than the P-10C does, by about maybe a quarter to a half of an inch. And some people say with the higher bore axis that the P320 has, it's going to have a little bit more muzzle rise or muzzle flip than the P-10C does. I don't pay a lot of attention to that. I think there's truth to it, but I don't consider it necessarily that big of a deal. I enjoy shooting both, but perhaps there is a little bit of truth to that. As you've watched the shooting, perhaps you've made a decision or made your mind up a little bit about that. I'll leave that up to you, but I enjoy shooting both guns for sure. One last thing to talk about real quick from a magazine perspective, both of these do have steel 15-round magazines, and they both come with two. So there isn't necessarily an advantage to one over the other in terms of your magazine capacity or how many magazines you get in the box. From a value standpoint, there's not a lot of difference between the two. We're looking at somewhere between $50 and $100 depending on what you're looking for. And what I mean by that is if you go with the P320 without the night sights, you're probably going to be looking in the low 500s for that. Whereas right now with the P-10C, whether it's the black or even the FDE, you're going to be looking right around $500 because it's new and there aren't very many of them. So there isn't much of a difference. However, I think that spectrum will widen a little bit for a couple of reasons. If you add night sights to the P320, that's going to increase this by $50, $75, something like that. And as more and more of the P-10Cs come in, you're going to see that price on those drop probably just a little bit. It's going to take some time for that to happen, but it will happen. So once again, this is an if I could only have one. So here comes the challenging part. And it's challenging because I love both of the guns in front of you. But if I had to choose just one and taking everything into account, whether it's the specs or features or value, shootability, what have you, I must admit, even though it's the newbie in the room, I would probably give the leg up or the nod to the P-10C, and for a couple of reasons. And this is all opinion, but this seems to sit just a little bit nicer in my hand. I like the way the grip feels. I like the way it points. I like the extra grip here on the sides. I think that's a really nice touch. I like the width, and I like the bore axis on it. Even though, again, I've said I don't make much of a fuss about that, it still means something. So for whatever reason, I'm really excited about the P-10C, and it's growing on me on a daily basis. That said, the P320 is a fantastic firearm, and I will never get rid of it. It's certainly a staple here, and I love shooting it. But if I could only have one, I would give the leg up to the P-10C. So I'm really excited to hear what you guys have to say about this, what your thoughts are, questions, which one you would choose. I'm excited to hear about that as well. Once again, don't forget to join us on Wednesday nights. Links are down below for both of those guys' channels. We switch things around every week. We're looking forward to seeing you guys there, and I will see you next time. Thanks.